You ever stop to think how seemingly separate global problems are actually, well, tangled up together?
It's quite something, isn't it?
Like the health of the fish in the Pacific has a ripple effect that touches communities struggling with poverty halfway across the world. And underpinning it all are these intricate webs of international and national laws.
Exactly.
It sounds massive, but that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're tackling the Sustainable Development Goals, that ambitious, to-do list the UN laid out in 2015 with a 2030 deadline.
And it's remarkable just how interconnected these goals are. The sources we've gathered for this deep dive touch on a huge range.
Yeah.
We're talking about the absolute necessity of protecting life in our oceans, that's SDG 14,
Hey.
and life on land, SDG 15.
Right.
But we're also going to explore how laws play a role in fostering peace, justice, and strong institutions, SDG 16, and the essential partnerships, SDG 17, that are needed to make any of this a reality.
And hold on, that's not the whole picture. We're also seeing how legal frameworks are crucial in the fight against no poverty, SDG 1,
Mm-hmm.
for ensuring good health and well-being, SDG 3, for promoting decent work and economic growth, SDG 8, and in the ongoing pursuit of gender equality, SDG 5.
It's a complex web, no doubt.
It really is. But our aim today is to really understand how the laws we have both internationally and within our own countries are being used, and frankly, where they need to be much stronger to face these enormous global challenges.
Okay, so to start untangling this, let's plunge into the state of our oceans.
Okay, well, the situation in our oceans is indeed critical. As highlighted by UN World Oceans Day, a shocking 90% of the big fish populations have been depleted.
90%. Wow.
And half of the coral reefs, these incredibly vital ecosystems, have already been destroyed. These aren't just numbers. They represent a profound threat to the health of the entire planet.
And the projections for the future are frankly terrifying. Experts are suggesting that by the end of this century, we could see over half, maybe even up to 90%, of all marine species facing extinction. That's a staggering loss. It is. And SDG Target 14.2 specifically calls for an ecosystem-based approach to how we manage our oceans.
What does that mean exactly, ecosystem-based?
Well, what's key here is moving beyond just looking at individual fish or specific pollution incidents, and instead understanding the intricate web of relationships within the entire marine environment. This holistic view is absolutely essential for any effective conservation efforts.
Right, seeing the whole picture. Now, I know there's been some headway made in actually protecting parts of our oceans, right? SDG Target 14.5 aim to conserve at least 10% of coastal and marine areas by 2020. How close did we get to that?
We made significant progress. By 2021, about 8% of coastal and marine areas were under some form of protection.
Okay, so almost there.
Almost. This mirrors the IEG biodiversity targets, which also had a 10% goal for 2020. While we didn't quite hit the mark, it shows a real push and some momentum in the right direction for marine conservation.
That's a positive sign. But one of the big pressures on ocean health is definitely overfishing. And I know that's often linked to government subsidies. That's where FDG Target 14.6 comes into play.
Exactly. Fisheries subsidies can create a really tricky situation. Think about it. One country might be reluctant to cut back on their subsidies because they worry that other countries will keep theirs in place.
Huh. The free rider problem.
Precisely. Nations that benefit from the continued exploitation of fish stocks without contributing to the solution. Furthermore, many fish populations are straddling stocks. They migrate across different countries' waters and into international waters.
Making it impossible for one country to fix alone.
Right, which makes it almost impossible for any single nation to effectively regulate subsidies on its own. A truly global approach is necessary.
And it sounds like the World Trade Organization, or WTO, stepped up with a pretty significant agreement back in June 2022.
Yes, for anyone not familiar, the WTO is the international body that deals with the rules of trade between nations.
And what's really interesting here is the direct connection between a very specific SDG target and a concrete international legal agreement.
Absolutely. The WTO agreement on fisheries subsidies is a landmark achievement. After more than 2 decades of negotiations, it directly tackles illegal, unreported, and unregulated IUU fishing,
That's the one.
as well as the problems of overfishing and overcapacity in fishing fleets, by aiming to curb the harmful subsidies that actually encourage these destructive practices.
That sounds like a major step forward, but there's a condition, isn't there? It needs a certain number of countries to actually ratify it to become fully operational.
Yes, that's a crucial point to understand. For the agreement to come into force, 2/3 of the WTO's member countries need to formally accept it.
And how's that going?
Well, as of June 2023, only 14 members had actually done so. So while the agreement itself is a huge step in the right direction, it still needs a significant amount of political will and further action from many more countries to truly have a global impact.
Okay, so watch this space. Moving beyond these specific trade agreements, there are also broader international conventions aimed at protecting marine life in general, right? Like the Bond Convention.
The Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, often called the Bond Convention, yes, it's a really key legal instrument. It legally binds the 133 countries that are party to it as of June 2023
That's quite a few.
to cooperate on efforts to conserve endangered migratory species and their crucial habitats. Appendix 1 of the convention lists those species that are considered endangered, while Appendix 2 includes species that would significantly benefit from international cooperation.
So it sets up a framework for working together.
Exactly. The convention encourages the development of both legally binding and less formal regional agreements that are specifically tailored to address particular conservation needs.
And what about the vast areas of the high seas, those waters that are beyond the jurisdiction of any single country? I know that's been a real challenge for conservation efforts.
Absolutely. The High Seas Treaty, which was adopted in June 2023, but is currently awaiting ratification by individual countries, is a really significant development addressing precisely this issue.
How does it work?
Well, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, which is essentially the overarching legal framework for ocean activities, has limitations when it comes to effectively governing the high seas. Currently, only a very small percentage of these areas are actually protected.
Right.
This new treaty aims to establish a system of multilateral governance and regulation in these high seas areas. It covers things like the responsible use of marine resources, the conservation of biodiversity, and overall environmental protection through its 75 articles.
So filling a major gap.
Essentially, yes. It's trying to create accountability and rules in areas where no single nation has direct authority.
So a move towards more accountability in these vast international waters, that sounds really important. And it's not just these big global treaties. It looks like there are also important efforts happening at a regional level, too.
Exactly. We have a network of regional conventions that focus on the specific needs of different marine environments. Take, for example, the Bucharest Convention for the Mediterranean,
Okay.
the Convention for the Black Sea, the Helsinki Convention for the Baltic Sea, the Nairobi Convention for the Eastern African region, and the Lima Convention for the Southeast Pacific.
So tailored approaches.
Right. These all demonstrate how countries in specific geographic areas are coming together to cooperate on tackling issues like controlling pollution, protecting biodiversity, and ensuring the sustainable management of their shared marine resources, often tailored to the unique challenges they face.
It's like a multi-layered approach, starting with these big global agreements and then drilling down to these more specific regional collaborations. And then, of course, individual countries have their own national laws to protect their marine environments.
Yes, these national legal frameworks are absolutely crucial for actually implementing the commitments made in these international agreements. We see examples like Hong Kong's dumping at sea ordinance and its merchant shipping, Prevention and Control of Pollution Ordinance, as well as Kenya's Fisheries Management and Development Act and its Wildlife Conservation and Management Act.
So translating principles into action.
Exactly. These kinds of laws take those broad international principles and translate them into concrete actions within a country's own territory and jurisdiction, regulating activities that could harm the marine environment.
And some countries are even setting legally binding targets for marine conservation within their own borders, like the UK.
That's right. The UK's Environment Act 2021 actually includes a legally binding target to restore marine protected areas and also to improve the health of its inland water bodies.
So that's quite a strong commitment.
It really demonstrates a strong commitment to ocean health at the national level, going beyond just general policy statements to create actual enforceable legal obligations.
Now, our sources also bring up some really interesting legal cases that relate to marine conservation in practice.
These cases are fascinating because they show us how these legal frameworks are actually being used in real-world situations to try and protect marine ecosystems. The Brazilian case, Public Prosecutor's Office VH Carlos Schneider, S.A. Comercio e Industria, and others from 2007, is a really powerful example of the legal protection that can be afforded to vital ecosystems like mangroves. The court recognized their immense ecological, social, and economic importance and actually ordered the company responsible for the damage to restore the affected mangrove forest.
And that decision held up.
It was upheld through multiple appeals, yes.
Impressive.
Right.
And the Canyon case concerning the Elapset project, Muhammad Ali Badi and others, the Attorney General and 11 others, sounds like it really tackled the potential environmental impact of a major infrastructure project on the coast.
This 2018 case involved residents in Lamu, Kenya, who were deeply concerned about the potential devastating effects of the massive Lapsset project, that's the Lamu Port South Sudan-Ethiopia transport corridor, on their local marine ecosystem.
What were their main worries?
Their worries included the destruction of crucial mangrove forests and increased pollution. They argued that the strategic environmental assessment that the government had conducted had significant flaws and didn't properly account for the potential damage.
And the outcome?
Well, while the court's final decision might not have been a complete halt to the project, it really underscores the important role that legal challenges can play in scrutinizing and potentially mitigating the environmental consequences of large-scale development projects on sensitive marine life.
So it's clear that laws at all levels, from international down to national, are absolutely vital when it comes to protecting our oceans. And it's not just about the fish and the coral reefs, it's really about our own survival, too.
Precisely. As our source material reminds us, lawyers and legal professionals have a crucial role to play in understanding and ultimately protecting life below water. Our oceans are absolutely fundamental for so many things.
Like,
Well, they absorb huge amounts of carbon dioxide, they provide food for billions of people, they're a source of potential energy, and they're even integral to the water cycle that we all depend on. Understanding the existing legal frameworks and the fundamental ecological importance of our oceans is really the very first step towards achieving effective and lasting protection.
okay, so we've taken a deep dive into the oceans. Now let's turn our attention to the land with SDG 15, life on land. This goal covers a huge amount of territory, quite literally.
It certainly does. SDG 15 is all about protecting, restoring, and promoting the sustainable use of our terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably managing our forests, combating the increasing problem of desertification and land degradation,
Big issues.
and ultimately halting the alarming loss of biodiversity. And when we talk about biodiversity here, it's really important to understand what we mean.
Go on.
It's the incredible variety of all forms of life on Earth, from the smallest genes to entire complex ecosystems.
And there was a specific target set for 2020 related to the conservation and sustainable use of these ecosystems, wasn't there?
Yes, that target aimed to ensure the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of all our terrestrial and inland freshwater ecosystems, including vitally important areas like forests, wetlands, mountains, and drylands.
Why is that so crucial?
Well, it aimed to align these efforts with international agreements. Protecting these diverse ecosystems is absolutely fundamental for safeguarding biodiversity, for providing us with essential resources like clean water and timber, and even for acting as natural defenses against things like floods and landslides.
And it seems there's been some encouraging progress in actually protecting key biodiversity areas around the world.
Encouragingly, yes.
Yeah.
The global coverage of areas that are identified as key for biodiversity has actually doubled since the year 2000, reaching 50% by 2021.
Doubled. That's significant.
It is. And this includes not just our forests, but also those other crucial ecosystems like wetlands, mountains, and drylands, which really reflect a broader understanding of what we need to protect to maintain a healthy planet.
Now, a really pressing issue for many parts of the world is the growing threat of desertification. SDG Target 15.3 has a goal to combat this and restore degraded land by 2030. Why is this so critically important?
What's truly striking here is the sheer scale of the human impact of desertification. It's essentially the degradation of dryland ecosystems, often caused by unsustainable human activities like overgrazing and deforestation.
How many people are affected?
Around 2 billion people globally depend directly on these very fragile dryland ecosystems for their livelihoods, and a staggering 90% of them live in developing countries.
That's huge.
And projections estimate that in the next decade alone, as many as 50 million people could be displaced from their homes and communities due to desertification. So this isn't just an environmental problem. It's deeply intertwined with poverty eradication, socioeconomic stability, and the overall sustainable development of entire regions and populations.
And speaking of specific and often overlooked ecosystems, the UN even dedicated an entire year to the importance of mountains back in 2022.
Yes. 2022 was designated as the UN's International Year of Sustainable Mountain Development. This really highlighted the critical role that these often overlooked ecosystems play in providing fresh water, harboring unique biodiversity, and supporting the livelihoods of millions of people. It aimed to raise greater awareness about the need for their conservation.
Makes sense. SDG Target 15.5 focuses very specifically on halting biodiversity loss. How do we even begin to measure progress on something as complex as that?
Well, the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is a key international agreement on this issue, has proposed various indicators for measuring progress. One that's particularly relevant to SDG Target 15.5 is the Red List Index.
The Red List Index.
Yes, this index draws on data from the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species and assesses the overall extinction risk across entire groups of species. This gives us a broad picture of how biodiversity is faring globally and whether we're moving in the right direction.
Got it. Now, when we talk about protecting endangered species, one international treaty that often comes up is CITES. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, or CITES, is a really crucial agreement that regulates the international trade in over 40,000 different species of animals and plants.
40,000?
Yes. Countries that are parties to the convention commit to implementing a system of permits and certificates for the export and re-export of species that are listed under its appendices. These listings range from species that are critically endangered
The highest protection.
to those that are protected to prevent unsustainable exploitation. However, CITES does face certain limitations. For example, it doesn't have provisions for the extradition of individuals involved in illegal wildlife trade.
Oh, really?
And the penalties for such trade are largely determined by the individual signatory states, which can lead to inconsistencies in enforcement across different countries.
I see. We talked earlier about the Bonn Convention in the context of marine species, but it also plays a role in protecting terrestrial migratory species, right?
Exactly. The Bonn Convention's legally binding commitment for its member countries to cooperate in the conservation of endangered migratory species and their habitats extends to those species that migrate across land as well.
So it covers both land and sea. And when it comes to the specific challenge of combating desertification, there's the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. What's the fundamental approach of this agreement?
The UNCCD takes what's often described as a bottom-up approach. It really emphasizes the importance of participation, building partnerships at all levels, and decentralizing efforts to combat desertification.
So involving local communities.
Exactly. It actively encourages local communities, who are often the most directly affected by land degradation, to play a significant role in developing and implementing solutions. The convention also places a strong focus on fostering cooperation between developed and developing countries, particularly in the vital areas of transferring and sharing knowledge and technologies for sustainable land management practices.
Our sources also briefly mention the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety and the Nagoya Protocol on Access to Genetic Resources. How do these fit into the broader biodiversity picture?
Good question. The Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety specifically addresses the potential risks that modern biotechnology might pose to biological diversity, focusing on the safe transfer, handling, and use of living modified organisms.
Okay, so biotech safety.
Right. The Nagoya Protocol on Access to Genetic Resources and Benefit Sharing, on the other hand, provides a legal framework for ensuring the fair and equitable sharing of benefits that arise from the utilization of genetic resources. This is particularly important for countries that are rich in biodiversity.
So fair use of genetic resources.
Exactly. Both of these are supplementary agreements under the overarching Convention on Biological Diversity.
It seems like many of these more specific agreements really build upon foundational documents, like the Stockholm Declaration from 1972 and the Rio Declaration from 1992.
Absolutely. The 1972 Stockholm Declaration on the Human Environment and the 1992 Rio Declaration on Environment and Development are really considered the cornerstones of global environmental governance.
Foundational texts.
They were incredibly important in raising global awareness about the growing concerns surrounding environmental degradation and in outlining some fundamental principles for achieving sustainable development. The Stockholm Declaration also directly led to the creation of the United Nations Environment Program, or UNEP,
UEP, right.
which remains a crucial international body in this field.
And more recently, we have the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. That sounds like a really significant development in international efforts.
It is indeed. Adopted at COP15 in 2022, this framework essentially provides a new global blueprint with the ambitious goal of halting and ultimately reversing nature loss by the crucial year of 2030.
Aligning with the SDGs.
Very much aligning with the overall ambitions of the UN's 2030 agenda. A really key element of this framework is the 30 by 30 target.
30 by 30?
Yes. aiming to protect at least 30% of terrestrial and marine areas around the world by 2030, with a particular focus on areas that are especially important for biodiversity. The framework also includes significant pledges.
Financial ones.
Yes, to mobilize $200 billion per year for biodiversity financing by 2030 and to reduce environmentally harmful subsidies by at least $500 billion annually.
Ambitious goals. Are there also important regional legal frameworks in place for land conservation, similar to what we saw with the oceans?
Yes, at the regional level, we have important agreements like the African Convention on the Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, also known as the Algiers Convention, signed way back in 1968.
Wow, that's quite old.
It is. This continent-wide agreement really aims to ensure the conservation, sustainable utilization, and overall development of soil, water, flora, and fauna resources across Africa, all based on sound scientific principles.
And just like with marine life, individual countries have their own sets of national laws and policies that are designed to protect lives on land within their borders.
Indeed. China, for example, has its comprehensive national strategy and action plan for biodiversity that covers 2011 to 2030, and it has also amended its wildlife protection law multiple times, most recently in 2022.
To strengthen it.
Yes, to try and better address the increasing risks to crucial wildlife habitats and to strengthen the penalties for illegal activities like poaching and deforestation. Hong Kong has its Environmental Impact Assessment Ordinance, which helps to prevent harmful development.
Right.
And its Protection of Endangered Species of Animals and Plants Ordinance, which effectively implements sites within its jurisdiction. Nigeria has established NESREA, the environmental agency, and is working on a new endangered species bill. And again, the UK's Environment Act 2021 places a strong emphasis on achieving biodiversity net gain in development projects.
Mean development should leave nature better off.
That's the goal. Developers must ensure their projects result in a net positive impact on biodiversity.
And our sources also highlight some really key legal cases that have had a significant impact on land conservation efforts.
These cases really demonstrate the practical application and, at times, the limitations of environmental laws on the ground. The Mau Forest case in Kenya is a stark example.
What happened there?
The Kenyan courts actually refused to award damages to individuals who had been illegally evicted from the Mau Forest, a vital water catchment area, because they had been involved in illegal deforestation activities themselves.
So they couldn't profit from wrongdoing.
Exactly. The court essentially emphasized that these plaintiffs could not profit from their own illegal actions that had contributed to climate change and environmental degradation. Then there's the Institute of Amazonian Studies v. Federal Union and Federal Environmental Agencies case in Brazil from 2022.
About the Amazon.
Yes, concerning the ongoing and devastating deforestation in the Amazon rainforest and highlighting the continuing legal efforts to try and enforce environmental protection measures and promote restoration.
A huge ongoing challenge.
Absolutely. And the green peacock's habitat case in China back in 2020 saw a major hydroelectric dam project actually halted due to the significant environmental risks it posed to the habitat of endangered green peacocks.
So the court stepped in.
It really showcased the potential power of environmental impact assessments and judicial review in protecting biodiversity.
Finally, our sources briefly touch upon the World Charter for Nature. What is the significance of this document?
Created by the UN General Assembly in 1982, the World Charter for Nature, while not a legally binding treaty in the same way as a convention, established 5 fundamental principles of conservation.
Guiding principle.
Yes, to guide and inform all human conduct that affects nature. These principles emphasize things like respecting nature and its essential processes, not compromising the genetic viability of the Earth, and applying these principles to all areas of the planet, both terrestrial and marine. So, while it might not carry the force of law like a treaty, it provides a really important ethical framework for conservation efforts worldwide.
So we see this really comprehensive legal landscape ranging from these very broad global agreements all the way down to local enforcement, all aimed at protecting the incredible diversity of life that we have on our planet. Now let's shift gears quite significantly and delve into SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. This one really feels like it's a foundational goal that underpins everything else we've been talking about.
It absolutely is. SDG 16 holds a really unique position in the 2030 agenda. It's not just a goal in and of itself, but as our source material strongly emphasizes, it's also a completely necessary enabler for achieving all of the other SDGs.
An enabler, how so?
Well, without peaceful, just, and strong institutions in place, making progress on things like ending poverty, ensuring quality education, or promoting sustainable economic growth becomes incredibly difficult, if not entirely impossible.
And a UN report from 2019 indicated that we still have a very long way to go when it comes to actually achieving these peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. That's a rather sobering thought.
It is. The report very clearly stated that realizing the ambitious goals of SDG 16 is still a significant distance away. In recent years leading up to that report, we hadn't seen substantial advances in key areas, like putting an end to violence, consistently promoting the rule of law, strengthening crucial institutions, or significantly increasing people's access to justice.
SDG Target 16.1 specifically focuses on significantly reducing all forms of violence and related death rates everywhere. What are some of the key indicators that are used to measure progress in this area?
Progress towards achieving this target is measured using several key indicators. These include the number of deaths directly related to conflict, the rates of intentional homicides,
Okay.
the proportion of the population that has been subjected to physical, psychological, or sexual violence in the recent past, and also the proportion of the population that reports feeling safe walking alone in their neighborhoods.
Feeling safe, right?
The World Bank highlights a really concerning statistic. Around 800 million people currently live in countries that are affected by fragility, ongoing conflict, and pervasive violence. This starkly underscores the very strong link that exists between violence and the persistence of extreme poverty around the world.
And SDG Target 16.2 directly addresses the horrific issue of ending abuse, exploitation, trafficking, and all forms of violence against and torture of children.
Sadly, the total number of identified victims of human trafficking around the world is actually growing.
Growing, not shrinking.
Growing. While this increase could partly reflect improved efforts in detecting these crimes, it also strongly suggests that the underlying problem is, in fact, getting worse in many regions. The vast majority of these identified victims are trafficked for the purpose of sexual exploitation,
Primarily sexual exploitation.
followed by those trafficked for forced labor, and alarmingly, nearly one-third of all identified trafficking victims are children. Children who are already in vulnerable situations, such as migrants or unaccompanied children, are found to be particularly susceptible.
That's deeply worrying. SDG Target 16.3 is all about promoting the rule of law at the national and international levels and ensuring equal access to justice for all. How is progress in this really crucial area typically assessed?
One of the key indicators used to track progress here is the proportion of prisoners who are being held in detention without having been formally sentenced for a crime.
Unsentenced detainees.
Exactly. This is closely linked to the fundamental legal principle of the presumption of innocence. While the global proportion of unsentenced prisoners has unfortunately remained relatively constant at around 31%, this still highlights a significant and ongoing challenge in ensuring the proper administration of justice and respecting basic legal rights in many countries.
31%, that seems very high. Our sources also make mention of the World Justice Project's Rule of Law Index. What kind of insights does that index provide?
The World Justice Project compiles a really comprehensive rating of countries around the world based on 8 key themes that are considered essential components of the rule of law.
What are those themes?
Things like limits on government powers, absence of corruption, government openness, fundamental rights protection, order and security, regulatory enforcement, civil justice accessibility, and criminal justice effectiveness.
A broad range.
Yes. Their data from 2020 revealed a concerning global trend. For the third consecutive year, more countries actually experienced a decline rather than an improvement in their overall rule of law performance,
At a decline, so going backwards.
indicating a potentially weakening and stagnating of the rule of law in many parts of the world, unfortunately.
Okay. SDG Target 16.4 has a focus on significantly reducing illicit financial and arms flows, strengthening the recovery and return of stolen assets, and combating all forms of organized crime. That's obviously a massive and incredibly complex area to tackle.
It certainly is. This target specifically includes the vital efforts to reduce the trafficking of illegal arms, which unfortunately fuels so much conflict around the globe,
Right.
and to effectively tackle all forms of transnational organized crime, which is estimated to generate an astonishing $870 billion in illicit profits every single year.
$870 billion.
Yes. This kind of illegal activity not only undermines sustainable development efforts, but also results in severe breaches of fundamental human rights.
And what about SDG Target 16.5 on substantially reducing corruption and bribery in all their forms? It seems like measuring progress on something like that would be particularly difficult.
You're absolutely right. There is a really critical lack of readily available data to accurately measure progress on key aspects of this target, such as illicit financial flows and the illegal flows of arms.
Why the lack of data?
This significant data gap and often deeply entrenched issues. The UN's High-Level Political Forum in 2019 specifically called for much greater attention and more robust efforts to gather data and address these areas.
So more focus needed. SDG Target 16.6 aims to develop effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels. What are some of the ways that progress in this area is typically tracked?
Some of the key indicators used to measure progress here include looking at primary government expenditures as a proportion of the original budget that was approved, broken down by different sectors.
Budget transparency.
Exactly. And also the proportion of the population that reports being satisfied with their most recent experience of using public services. Building effective, accountable, and transparent public services is not only fundamental for achieving this specific target, but is also absolutely essential for making progress across all of the other SDGs.
SDG Target 16.7 focuses on ensuring responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making at all levels. What kind of indicators are relevant here?
The indicators used to assess progress on this target include looking at the proportion of positions held in public institutions, like legislatures, the public service, the judiciary,
Right.
by different demographic groups compared to their representation of the overall national population. It also looks at the proportion of the population who express the belief that their own opinions can actually influence government decisions.
Whether people feel heard.
Precisely.
SDG Target 16.9 addresses the really crucial issue of providing legal identity for all, including through birth registration. Why is this so important?
Legal identity, which is essentially the formal recognition of a person's existence before the law, is absolutely essential for being able to access a really wide range of fundamental services and for protecting children from various forms of exploitation and abuse. Ensuring that all births are properly registered is a really key indicator for measuring progress towards achieving this important target.
So it's about access and protection. Our sources also highlight the really vital role that lawyers and legal professionals can play in upholding and enforcing the global legal order and in contributing to broader access to justice for all, often through the provision of pro bono legal work.
Absolutely. Lawyers possess a really unique and highly specialized skill set and carry a significant professional responsibility to actively uphold the rule of law.
How can they contribute specifically?
By providing pro bono legal support in complex, often multilateral legal processes, by working to strengthen access to justice for vulnerable populations who might otherwise be excluded, and by assisting civil society organizations that are working on these issues on the ground. The legal profession can make truly crucial contributions towards achieving the goals of SDG 16.
Now, there is a vast array of international legal frameworks that really underpin SDG 16. With so many in place, where do we even begin to understand the overall picture?
Well, the fundamental foundation really lies with the Charter of the United Nations and the Statute of the International Court of Justice, both from 1945.
The post-war architecture.
Exactly, near universal ratification. These foundational documents essentially establish the overarching framework for international relations between states and create the principal judicial organ for settling legal disputes between them. Then we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948, which sets out the fundamental human rights meant to be universally protected. Following that, we have key legally binding treaties like the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, ICSCR, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, both from 1966, which elaborate in much greater detail on these rights and create legal obligations for the countries that ratify them.
And specific groups.
Yes, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC, is incredibly important and actually the most widely ratified human rights treaty. Other really important frameworks include CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women,
which we'll come back to,
the Protocol Against Trafficking in Persons, the Convention Against Enforced Disappearance, ICPPD, the UN Convention Against Corruption, UNCSC, the Declaration on the Right to Development, and the Declaration on the Rule of Law. Each serves a specific purpose in promoting justice, rights, and the rule of law globally.
It's a huge body of law, and there are also really important regional legal frameworks in place that contribute to these goals, right?
Yes, absolutely. Regional bodies also play a really critical role. For example, the African Union has its Constitutive Act and the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance.
Promoting good governance in Africa.
Right. And the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, with its 57 participating states, engages in a really wide range of activities relevant to SDG 16, like conflict prevention, human rights protection, and rule of law initiatives.
It's fascinating to see how these broad international and regional frameworks then translate into the specific national laws and how they are actually enforced on the ground in different countries.
We see numerous examples. Argentina, for instance, has its comprehensive anti-trafficking law and other laws to prevent trafficking and labor fraud with clear penalties.
Okay.
Indonesia has enacted a specific law on legal aid. Italy has legislative decrees addressing illicit financial flows and cryptocurrencies. Rwanda has a specific law on fighting corruption. Kenya has its Access to Information Act and Public Participation Act.
Promoting transparency.
Exactly. Even Afghanistan has an Access to Information law. India has its Prevention of Corruption Act, and its Supreme Court has even clarified who counts as a public servant under this law, extending it sometimes to private bank employees.
Interesting. And some challenges, too.
Yes, on a more challenging note, the Dominican Republic has faced significant issues related to providing birth certificates for people of Haitian descent, highlighting ongoing challenges related to legal identity and discrimination.
And the European Court of Human Rights has also played a really important role in interpreting and upholding rights that are closely linked to SDG 16.
Absolutely. The European Court of Human Rights, or ECTHR, has heard several landmark cases. For example, in Center for Democracy and Media Pluralism v. Italy from 2022, the court considered issues related to the right to access information.
Access to information again?
And in Magyar Helsinki Bizottság v. Hungary from 2016, it further clarified aspects of this fundamental right under Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. These kinds of cases really demonstrate how regional human rights courts contribute to defining and upholding crucial principles like transparency and accountability.
You mentioned earlier that SDG 16 is often seen as an enabler for all the other SDGs. Could you elaborate a little bit more on why that connection is so important?
What's really crucial to understand is this fundamental interconnectedness. Effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions are not just an important goal in themselves. They are the very bedrock, the essential foundation needed to successfully deliver on all the other SDGs.
Give us an example.
Well, whether we're talking about ensuring access to justice for everyone, SDG 16, or striving to eradicate poverty, SDG 1, providing quality education, SDG 4, achieving gender equality, SDG 5, or working to conserve biodiversity, SDGs 14 and 15.
All of them.
Having well-functioning institutions that have the necessary resources, clear processes, and are held accountable is absolutely essential for making meaningful and lasting progress.
It seems like the rapid rise of technology in recent years, as well as significant global events, have also presented some really new and complex challenges for achieving peace, justice, and strong institutions.
Indeed. The ever-increasing surveillance capabilities of states raise really significant concerns about the fundamental right to privacy and other civil liberties.
Like state surveillance tech.
Exactly. Additionally, the various measures that governments around the world implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic have had really profound consequences, both positive and potentially negative, for the overall functioning of states and for the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms.
Our sources also briefly touch upon the role of traditional justice systems in some societies. How do these informal systems typically relate to the more formal legal frameworks that we've been discussing?
It's really important to recognize that in many parts of the world, informal or traditional justice systems often operate alongside the statutory legal systems.
Why are they still used?
These systems can play a really important role in providing avenues for dispute resolution and delivering a sense of justice in situations where the more formal legal options might be inaccessible, too expensive, or not culturally appropriate. However,
There's a but.
it's also important to acknowledge that these traditional systems can sometimes have weaknesses, particularly when it comes to ensuring proper procedural safeguards and in addressing the potential for discrimination based on factors like gender or social status.
So, pros and cons. Finally, in the context of SDG 16, our sources mention the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and also the findings of the Justice for All report.
The UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights provide a really important framework for how businesses should respect human rights in all of their operations,
Business responsibility.
which is absolutely crucial for upholding justice and the rule of law in the economic sphere. The Justice for All report was significant because it really highlighted the staggering justice gap that exists globally.
How big a gap?
Billions of people lacking meaningful access to justice systems. And it also underscored the very substantial economic costs that are associated with this lack of justice. This report ultimately led to the Declaration on Equal Access to Justice for All by 2030, and a renewed call from 16 countries in 2021 for a much more people-centered approach to justice delivery.
It's a truly multifaceted goal, SDG 16, with this incredibly complex web of legal frameworks and many ongoing challenges that we still need to address. Now let's move on to SDG 17, partnerships for the goals. It seems pretty obvious that we can't achieve any of this in isolation. Collaboration is absolutely key.
Absolutely. SDG 17 really underscores the critical importance of building strong multi-stakeholder partnerships at all levels, globally, regionally, and nationally, if we have any hope of achieving all of the ambitious sustainable development goals.
And things like A4ID fit here.
Yes. The work of organizations like A4ID, with their SDG legal initiative and their legal guide to the SDGs, perfectly exemplifies this by aiming to empower lawyers and legal professionals worldwide to actively take action and contribute to the realization of these goals.
And the SDGs themselves, as we touched on at the beginning, really built upon the foundation of the earlier Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, but they have a much broader scope and far greater ambition.
That's exactly right. Unlike the MDGs, which primarily focused on the challenges faced by developing countries, the SDGs are truly universal,
Applying to everyone.
meaning they apply to every nation on the planet. They also address a much wider range of interconnected issues, from tackling inequalities and combating climate change to promoting sustainable economic growth and fostering peace and justice for all.
And how are they tracked?
These 17 interdependent goals are further broken down into 169 specific targets, and progress towards achieving them is monitored using a set of 232 indicators. The Addis Ababa Action Agenda provides a comprehensive set of concrete policy actions to support implementation. And the UN Secretary General's annual reports, along with the high-level political forum, play really key roles in regularly reviewing the global progress being made.
One really crucial aspect of building effective partnerships, particularly for developing countries, is ensuring financial stability. SDG Target 17.4 specifically addresses the issue of debt sustainability.
This is a growing area of serious concern. Even before the recent series of global crises, a significant percentage of low-income countries were already facing a high risk of falling into debt distress.
And recent events made it worse.
Yes. The COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing war in Ukraine have only further intensified the need for borrowing in many of these countries, really highlighting what's being called a Great Finance Divide,
The Great Finance Divide.
where developed countries often have access to ultra-low interest rates for borrowing, while the poorest nations face increasingly tight fiscal constraints and higher borrowing costs.
A real disparity. SDG Target 17.5 focuses on adopting and implementing investment promotion regimes specifically for least developed countries, or LDCs. What's the main goal behind this?
The primary aim here is to attract much-needed foreign investment to LDCs through the establishment of strong national and international partnerships. These investment promotion regimes often include offering more favorable interest rates on loans
Leverage terms.
and focusing on supporting the growth of key revenue-generating sectors within these countries, such as energy, telecommunications, and financial services, which can ultimately contribute to their sustainable economic development.
The transfer of environmentally sound technologies, or ESTs, is another really key element of SDG 17, particularly under Target 17.7. Why is this so important?
Well, SDG Target 17.7 specifically addresses the promotion of the development, transfer, dissemination, and diffusion of environmentally sound technologies to developing countries on favorable terms.
And how's that going?
Encouragingly, there has been a significant decline in the average tariffs imposed on environmental goods in low-income countries since the early 2000s. This reduction in tariffs can play a really important role in making these crucial ESTs more accessible and affordable, thereby helping to promote their wider adoption.
SDG Target 17.8 really emphasizes the importance of science, technology, and innovation for achieving the SDGs, with access to the internet being highlighted as a key indicator of progress.
Yes, internet access is indeed absolutely crucial for fostering connectivity,
Yeah.
enabling the sharing of vital information and knowledge, and promoting innovation.
But access isn't equal, right?
No, while we've seen a significant proliferation of mobile broadband technology around the globe in recent years, significant access gaps unfortunately still persist, particularly in the least developed countries and in landlocked developing nations. In 2021, for example, only a relatively small percentage of the population in LDCs had access compared to much higher rates elsewhere.
Capacity building is another absolutely vital aspect of effective partnerships, and that's specifically covered under SDG Target 17.9. What's the focus here?
This target really highlights the ongoing importance of providing well-coordinated financial and technical assistance to developing countries. Crucially, this assistance needs to be carefully aligned with the recipient country's own national strategies and priorities to be truly effective.
And South-South cooperation.
While it can be challenging to accurately quantify South-South cooperation, which often involves things like knowledge sharing and building digital capacities rather than just financial flows, qualitative analysis clearly demonstrates the really significant benefits this kind of collaboration can bring, especially in addressing shared global crises.
SDG Target 17.9 promotes a universal, rules-based, open, non-discriminatory, and equitable multilateral trading system under the World Trade Organization, or WTO. Where do things currently stand on achieving that?
Achieving a single, fully agreed upon multilateral trading system under the WTO is still very much a work in progress, and we currently see variations in the tariff schemes different countries apply.
But tariffs are generally going down.
Yes, there has been a general trend of progressive reduction in import tariffs around the world over time. Unfortunately, recent economic conflicts between major trading partners
Like U.S.-China.
and significant global events like the pandemic and the war in Ukraine have posed considerable threats to this progress and have introduced new complexities into the global trade landscape.
SDG Target 17.111 aims to significantly increase the exports in developing countries, in particular with a view to doubling the least developed countries' share of global exports by 2020. How has that goal fared recently?
Interestingly, the exports of developing countries as a whole actually saw a faster rate of recovery post-pandemic compared to developed countries.
But not for LDCs.
However, the least developed countries experienced a worrying decline in their exports of both commodities and services during the same period, essentially reversing some of the progress they had managed to make over the previous decade. Unfortunately, the ambitious goal of doubling the LDC's share of global exports by 2020 was not met.
Policy coherence for sustainable development, or PCSD, is a really interesting concept that's highlighted under SDG Target 17.14. What exactly does that entail?
PCSD is all about ensuring that the various different policies that governments and international organizations put in place are actually mutually reinforcing and work together effectively to advance the overall goals of sustainable development.
So avoiding policy clashes.
Exactly. It involves carefully identifying potential trade-offs and mitigating risks that might exist between different policy areas, and it really emphasizes the need to fully integrate the economic, social, environmental, and governance dimensions of sustainable development at every stage of the policymaking process.
Data disaggregation, which is mentioned under SDG Target 17.18, seems like it would be absolutely crucial for really understanding the nuances of progress and ensuring that no one is left behind.
Absolutely. Having data that is carefully disaggregated by various key factors like income level, gender, age, geographic location, and other relevant characteristics is absolutely vital for accurately measuring progress and for understanding the capacity of different national statistical systems.
And that capacity varies.
It's worth noting that data capacity can vary quite significantly across different regions and countries.
Our sources also make mention of preferential market access that is often granted to least developed countries under various WTO decisions. Can you explain that a bit?
Yes, the WTO has actually established various legal frameworks and waivers that allow for preferential treatment to be given to goods and services that originate from LDCs.
How does that help?
This can include things like allowing developing country WTO members to extend more favorable market access conditions to products from LDCs, aiming to help boost their economic growth through trade.
And finally, SDG 17 really underscores the fundamental importance of the multi-stakeholder partnerships themselves under Target 17.16. Can you give us some examples of what that looks like in practice?
Exactly. We see numerous really important initiatives that demonstrate the power of these kinds of collaborations. Examples include the Addis Tax Initiative.
For tax cooperation.
Right. The European Consensus on Development, the G20 Common Framework for Debt Treatments, the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA,
Boosting African trade.
and the Global Investor for Sustainable Development, GISD Alliance. We've also seen really successful individual partnerships, such as JVI's crucial role in global health and vaccine access,
Very important.
and the Cornerstone Initiative Legal Aid Project in Rwanda. However, it's also important to acknowledge that there are ongoing challenges.
Such as?
Ensuring the transparency and accountability of these partnerships, navigating differing national and international legal frameworks, and also the restrictions some countries place on foreign direct investment.
It's so clear that achieving the ambitious Sustainable Development Goals really demands a truly global and collaborative effort that cuts across all sectors. Governments, businesses, civil society, and individuals all have a crucial role to play. Now, let's delve into what is arguably the most fundamental of all the goals, SDG 1, no poverty.
It is indeed. SDG 1 has the overarching aim of ending poverty in all of its forms everywhere. The United Nations has defined absolute poverty as a severe deprivation of basic human needs.
Which includes more than just income, right?
Right. It includes not just a lack of sufficient income, but also a lack of access to essential things like food, clean water, adequate sanitation, basic health care, shelter, quality education, and access to vital information. So it's a much broader concept.
We've seen some really significant global progress in reducing the rates of extreme poverty over the years, but the COVID-19 pandemic unfortunately caused a major and very concerning setback in those efforts.
Tragically, yes. The year 2020 saw an estimated 93 million additional people push back into conditions of extreme poverty as a direct consequence of the pandemic and its widespread economic disruptions.
93 million.
Yes, this essentially reversed more than 4 years of hard-won progress in poverty reduction. While the situation has improved somewhat since then, it's estimated that around 75 million of these individuals are still living in extreme poverty as a direct result of the pandemic.
The impact lingers.
It really underscores the urgent need for intensified and targeted efforts to address poverty, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, which is currently home to the majority of the world's population living in extreme poverty.
SDG Target 1.3 specifically focuses on implementing nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including floors. Can you explain what those floors are?
This target really recognizes the absolutely fundamental role that social protection systems play in safeguarding the most vulnerable members of society and in effectively reducing poverty. The concept of floors refers to the national floors of social protection championed by the ILO.
The International Labor Organization.
Right. These floors essentially aim to guarantee a minimum level of essential social security for everyone, including access to essential health care and basic income security, to help prevent people from falling into poverty and provide a safety net.
And nationally appropriate.
That phrase is really important here, as it acknowledges that these systems need to be carefully tailored to each country's specific context, resources, and overall level of economic development to be most effective.
Our sources also emphasize the really crucial interconnectedness of SDG 1 with other fundamental elements like ensuring access to justice for all, respecting and protecting human rights, and recognizing the important role that the private sector can play in long-term poverty eradication.
Yes, these are all absolutely vital components. The UN guiding principles on business and human rights are particularly relevant here, encouraging businesses to proactively address any negative impacts their operations might have on human rights.
Which can contribute to poverty.
Often, yes. Lawyers and legal professionals also have a really crucial role to play. By actively condemning laws and policies that may contribute to poverty through public interest litigation, by advocating for much-needed legal reforms, and by providing essential legal aid services to those living in poverty.
And there are also some really fundamental international human rights instruments that directly relate to the overarching goal of poverty eradication, aren't there?
Absolutely. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights recognizes key rights relevant to poverty reduction, like the right to life, property, social security, work under just conditions, and an adequate standard of living.
Including food, housing, healthcare.
Exactly. The International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, ICSCR, goes even further by legally binding ratifying countries to progressively realize rights like social security and an adequate standard of living, explicitly mentioning adequate food, clothing, and housing.
The International Labor Organization, or ILO, also plays a really significant role in global efforts to eradicate poverty through its core focus on promoting decent work opportunities for all.
Indeed. The ILO's fundamental aim is to promote rights at work, encourage decent employment, enhance social protection, and strengthen social dialogue on work-related issues. The concept of decent work, also key to SDG 8,
Which we'll get to.
is widely recognized as a crucial driver for poverty eradication. For the vast majority living in poverty, their own labor and ability to earn a fair income are often their most important assets.
Our sources also specifically highlight the importance of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, or UNDRIP, in the context of working towards SDG 1. Can you tell us more about that connection?
UNDRIP provides a really important and universal framework guaranteeing minimum standards for the well-being and rights of Indigenous peoples, who are often disproportionately affected by poverty and marginalization.
What rights does it cover?
It specifically emphasizes their fundamental rights to education, to enjoy all applicable labor laws, to maintain and improve their own economic and social conditions, and to have rights over their traditionally owned lands and resources, all crucial for poverty reduction within these communities.
It's always really insightful to look at specific national examples of initiatives that have been put in place to try and reduce poverty. Brazil's Bolsa Familia program is one that is often cited as a success story.
Brazil's Bolsa Familia, yes. It was a conditional cash transfer program, widely credited with significantly contributing to reducing both poverty rates and income inequality in the country during the 2000s.
How much impact did it have?
While there were certainly other economic and social factors at play, extensive research suggests that Bolsa Familia accounted for a very substantial portion of the overall poverty reduction achieved.
China's establishment of a universal pension scheme is another really noteworthy national example in the fight against poverty, particularly among older populations.
Following a series of significant reforms, China successfully established a comprehensive universal pension scheme covering both rural and urban populations.
How does it work?
It effectively combines government-funded basic pensions with individual contributions and local government subsidies. It achieved near-universal coverage by 2017, providing a crucial safety net for millions of older people.
And Colombia has developed a really interesting and innovative approach to measuring poverty through its Multidimensional Poverty Index, or MPI. How does that differ from more traditional measures?
Colombia's MPI is significant because it goes beyond simply looking at income levels. Instead, it assesses poverty across 5 key dimensions of people's lives:
Such as?
access to quality education, living conditions for children and youth, access to decent work, health status, and access to essential public services and adequate housing. This provides a much more comprehensive and nuanced understanding of how people experience poverty.
Which helps tailor solutions.
Exactly. It can be really valuable in developing more targeted and effective solutions.
Our sources also mention a really landmark legal case in India, People's Union for Civil Liberties v. Union of India and others, which was fundamentally related to the right to food and its connection to poverty.
This 2003 ruling by the Supreme Court of India was truly landmark because it firmly established that the government has a fundamental duty to ensure that no one in the country goes hungry.
The right to food as part of the right to life.
Exactly. The court recognized the right to food as an intrinsic part of the fundamental right to life guaranteed by the Indian Constitution, particularly in situations of drought, food scarcity, or other emergencies.
It's so clear that effectively tackling the complex issue of poverty is deeply and inextricably linked with making progress on so many of the other sustainable development goals. It's not something that can be addressed in isolation.
Absolutely. Ending poverty really relies on significant progress in areas like ending hunger, SDG 2, providing quality education, SDG 4, promoting decent work, SDG 8, and building resilient infrastructure, SDG 9.
And climate change impacts it too.
Yes, the adverse effects of climate change, SDG 13, also disproportionately impact those living in poverty, further highlighting the critical need for progress in areas like renewable energy, SDG 7, and responsible consumption and production, SDG 12. It truly requires a comprehensive, integrated approach.
And the significant economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic has really underscored just how fragile the progress we've made in poverty reduction can be, and also how economic shocks can have far-reaching impacts on people's wider legal rights and protections.
The profound economic consequences of the pandemic have, as we discussed, led to a significant increase in global poverty. These challenges are likely to be further exacerbated by ongoing issues like food shortages, rising living costs, and energy emergencies.
And these shocks affect legal rights.
They can have a knock-on effect, undermining legal rights related to land tenure, housing security, employment conditions, even civil liberties, really necessitating increased international support and strong political commitment.
Finally, our sources really emphasize the incredibly important role that pro bono legal interventions and well-designed legal awareness programs can play in directly supporting the poorest and most vulnerable communities and helping them to access justice.
Yes, pro bono legal aid services and carefully targeted legal awareness programs can be absolutely instrumental in upholding the fundamental human rights of even the poorest and most marginalized communities.
How do they help empower people?
By providing crucial education, accessible resources, and tailored training on their rights and available legal mechanisms, these initiatives can empower individuals and communities to understand and assert their rights, ultimately contributing to poverty reduction and promoting justice for all. The legal profession really has a fundamental responsibility here
To use its voice and expertise.
to actively condemn laws that contribute to poverty and to vigorously advocate for policies that effectively reduce poverty and promote greater justice and equality for everyone.
It's certainly sobering to really see the sheer scale and complexity of the global challenge of poverty, but it's also incredibly inspiring to see the wide range of legal tools, initiatives, and dedicated individuals working tirelessly to tackle it around the world. Now, let's turn our attention to SDG 3, good health and well-being. It's immediately clear that law plays a really significant role in this fundamental area.
Indeed, the law is an incredibly powerful tool for advancing global health in a multitude of ways.
Yeah.
From setting crucial regulations on things like road safety and tobacco control,
Right.
to designing and implementing universal health coverage schemes that aim to ensure everyone has access to necessary medical care. The fundamental right to health, recognized in numerous legal instruments, should really guide all health-related legal reforms.
Ensuring equitable access.
Exactly. And the rule of law itself is crucial in ensuring any public health measures taken during crises are proportionate, necessary, and non-discriminatory, respecting fundamental rights.
The World Health Organization, or WHO, obviously plays a really key role in global health governance. Our sources specifically mentioned their 13th General Program of Work. What's the significance of that?
The WHO's 13th General Program of Work, covering 2019 to 2023, essentially outlined the organization's core strategic priorities and planned activities in its ongoing mission to promote good health and well-being globally. It provided a roadmap for their work.
It's really important to remember that when we talk about health, it's not just about the absence of disease or infirmity, but it's actually influenced by a really wide range of interconnected factors in people's lives.
Absolutely. Socioeconomic conditions, cultural norms, and environmental factors all have a really significant impact on overall health outcomes. This really underscores the deep interconnectedness of SDG 3 with many of the other SDGs we've been discussing.
SDG 3 has several really specific targets. Let's start by looking at SDG Target 3.2, which focuses on ending preventable deaths of newborns and children under 5 years of age.
Significant progress has certainly been made globally in reducing child mortality rates in recent decades, but unfortunately, further concerted efforts are still urgently needed in many parts of the world to fully achieve this really crucial target.
SDG Target 3.3 addresses the critical need to combat major epidemics like HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, as well as often neglected tropical diseases that affect millions of people.
Global collaborative efforts have undoubtedly led to important advancements in the fight against these major diseases, but they unfortunately remain significant public health challenges in many regions, requiring continued and focused attention and sustained resources.
SDG Target 3.4 focuses on reducing premature mortality from non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, stroke, cancer, and diabetes, and also on promoting mental health and overall well-being.
Non-communicable diseases are now the leading cause of premature death worldwide.
The leading cause.
Yes, and there's an increasing global recognition that promoting and protecting mental health is absolutely integral to achieving overall good health and well-being.
SDG Target 3.5 specifically addresses the prevention and treatment of substance abuse, including the harmful use of alcohol and illicit drugs.
The harmful use of alcohol is a really significant contributor to global mortality and morbidity, and this target emphasizes the critical need for effective prevention and treatment strategies.
SDG Target 3.6 has the very clear aim of halving the number of global deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents.
Sadly, road traffic accidents continue to be a major cause of preventable death and injury, particularly among younger populations. Achieving this target requires much stronger road safety measures, improved infrastructure, and better enforcement.
SDG Target 3.7 focuses on ensuring universal access to sexual and reproductive health care services, including family planning, information, and education.
Ensuring that all individuals have access to these essential services is fundamental not only for gender equality and women's empowerment, but also crucial for overall health and well-being across the lifespan.
And SDG Target 3.8 has the really ambitious goal of achieving universal health coverage, ensuring that all people have access to the health services they need without facing financial hardship.
Achieving universal health coverage, where everyone, regardless of income or status, has access to quality health services, preventative, treatment, rehabilitation, palliative care, without suffering undue financial strain, is a real cornerstone of SDG 3 and a fundamental step towards health equity.
Our sources really highlight the absolutely critical role that lawyers and legal professionals can and should play in promoting legal and policy reforms that actively support the achievement of SDG 3 and its various targets.
Lawyers possess a really unique skill set and expertise that allows them to analyze and ultimately reform laws and policies that impact public health,
How so?
from regulations on marketing unhealthy foods to designing equitable healthcare systems. It's really crucial for all lawyers to consider how their specific practice intersects with public health goals and to proactively use their skills to advocate for positive health outcomes.
And pro bono work.
Yes, pro bono legal partnerships with organizations dedicated to improving human health can be a particularly effective way for legal professionals to contribute to SDG 3.
There are some really key international legal frameworks that underpin SDG 3, starting with the Constitution of the World Health Organization itself.
The WHO's constitution, dating back to 1946, explicitly recognizes the right to the highest attainable standard of health as a fundamental human right, laying a really important foundation.
And ICSCR.
Article 12 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights also elaborates further on this fundamental right to health.
The WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, or FCTC, is another really significant international treaty in the realm of public health.
The FCTC, adopted in 2003 with very high ratification, aims to reduce global tobacco consumption and its devastating health consequences through evidence-based measures. Its protocol on illicit trade in tobacco products further strengthens these efforts.
The International Health Regulations, or IHR, are another really crucial legal framework, particularly when it comes to managing and responding to global public health emergencies.
The revised IHR, adopted in 2007, provide a legally binding framework for the WHO and member states to effectively detect, assess, and respond to public health risks and emergencies that can cross international borders.
Like declaring emergencies.
Exactly. The WHO Director General has the authority to declare a public health emergency of international concern under these regulations, as was done with COVID-19.
Our sources also briefly mention the Declaration of Alma-Ata and various UN political declarations on HIV/AIDS. What was their significance?
The Declaration of Alma-Ata from 1978 really emphasized the critical importance of primary health care as the foundation for achieving health for all. The various UN political declarations on HIV/AIDS have been instrumental in guiding the global response, setting targets, and mobilizing resources.
ILO Recommendation 202 on social protection floors, which we discussed earlier in the context of poverty, also has direct relevance for achieving SDG 3. How so?
ILO Recommendation 202 provides guidance on establishing national floors of social protection. A key element is ensuring access to essential healthcare services for all, which directly aligns with SDG's 3 goals, particularly universal health coverage.
Regionally, the African Union's Charter on Human and People's Rights also explicitly recognizes the fundamental right to health for all individuals within its member states.
Yes. Article 16 of the African Charter recognizes the right of every individual to enjoy the best attainable state of physical and mental health, placing a clear obligation on member states to protect population health.
And our sources also make note of the fact that health-related litigation is becoming an increasingly common way for individuals and communities to seek redress for violations of their right to health.
That's right. We're seeing a growing number of legal cases being pursued in domestic courts around the world on grounds of medical negligence, malpractice, and failure to provide adequate and affordable health care. This trend highlights the increasing use of legal avenues to claim and enforce the right to health.
Finally, it's really important to acknowledge that achieving SDG 3 with its ambitious targets for health and well-being is deeply interconnected with progress across many of the other sustainable development goals that we've been discussing today.
Absolutely. Health outcomes are influenced by a really wide range of social, economic, and environmental determinants. This underscores the fact that achieving good health for all requires a comprehensive, integrated approach addressing not just healthcare systems, but also issues like poverty, hunger, education, gender equality, clean water, sanitation, and environmental quality.
So progress everywhere is needed.
Progress in all these areas is essential for creating the conditions in which people can lead healthy and fulfilling lives.
So from the fundamental right to health itself to the complex web of global and national legal frameworks that aim to protect and promote it, it's clear that law serves as an absolutely indispensable tool for achieving SDG 3. Now, let's move on to SDG 8. Decent work and economic growth. This is another area that's absolutely crucial for both individual well-being and overall societal progress.
It is indeed. The concept of decent work, encompassing elements like job security, fair pay, equal treatment, and social protections, is absolutely essential not only for individuals to achieve a stable and dignified livelihood, but also for societies to thrive economically and socially.
And the pandemic hit this hard.
Yes, the profound impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on global employment rates and the labor market really highlighted the fragility of these aspirations in the face of crises.
SDG Target 8.5 specifically focuses on achieving full and productive employment and equal pay for work of equal value for all women and men, including for young people and persons with disabilities. How are we currently progressing on that front?
While some progress has certainly been made in increasing overall employment rates, the persistent gender pay gap remains a significant challenge. This ongoing disparity really underscores the continued need for focused efforts to achieve true equal remuneration.
SDG Target 8.6 aims to substantially reduce the proportion of youth not in employment, education, or training. This is obviously a critical area for ensuring future economic growth and social stability.
Providing meaningful opportunities for young people through quality education, relevant skills training, and decent employment is absolutely vital, not just for their own future, but for the sustainable development of nations.
SDG Target 8.7 has a really crucial focus on taking immediate and effective measures to eradicate forced labor, end modern slavery and human trafficking, and secure the prohibition and elimination of the worst forms of child labor, including recruitment and use of child soldiers, and by 2025, end child labor in all its forms. This is a deeply concerning and persistent global issue.
Sadly, the global number of children in child labor actually saw a concerning rise in 2021.
A rise.
Not a decrease.
A rise. The first increase in 2 decades, highlighting setbacks, especially during economic hardship. Eradicating these abhorrent practices remains a critical and urgent global priority, demanding immediate action.
SDG Target 8.2 focuses on achieving higher levels of economic productivity through diversification, technological upgrading, and innovation, including through a focus on high-value added and labor-intensive sectors. How are these efforts being supported? Policies that actively promote productive economic activities, encourage decent job creation, foster entrepreneurship and innovation, and support high-value added sectors are all key to boosting productivity and driving sustainable growth.
SDG Target 8.3 emphasizes the importance of promoting development-oriented policies that support productive activities, decent job creation, entrepreneurship, creativity, and innovation, and encourage the formalization and growth of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, including through access to financial services. These enterprises are often the backbone of many economies.
Absolutely. Providing better access to essential financial services and addressing challenges identified by initiatives like the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor.
Like what challenges?
Such as relatively low levels of entrepreneurial education and training, as well as burdensome bureaucratic inefficiencies. These are all crucial steps in supporting the growth and formalization of SMEs and fostering a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Finally, SDG Target 8.9 looks at devising and implementing policies to promote sustainable tourism that creates jobs and promotes local culture and products. It can be a really significant economic driver when managed responsibly.
Indeed. Sustainable tourism has the potential to be a powerful engine for economic growth, generating employment and promoting local culture, all while minimizing potential damage to cultural heritage and the environment.
And the pandemic hit tourism hard.
It had a particularly devastating impact, really underscoring the urgent need for a truly sustainable and resilient recovery that prioritizes these principles.
Just as we've seen with the other SDGs, there are also several relevant articles within the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights that directly relate to the principles of decent work.
Yes, the UDHR and ICSCR Both recognize fundamental rights related to work, including the right to work itself, to just and favorable conditions, fair remuneration, safe and healthy conditions, and the right to form and join trade unions.
The International Labor Organization, or ILO as we've touched on, has a really central role in promoting decent work around the globe through its various international labor conventions.
The ILO has identified 8 core fundamental conventions covering basic principles and rights at work.
Can you list some?
Freedom of association, right to organize in collective bargaining, prohibition of forced labor, abolition of forced labor, minimum age for employment, elimination of the worst forms of child labor, equal remuneration, and prohibition of discrimination.
That's comprehensive.
These conventions are legally binding for those member states that ratify them, demonstrating a strong international commitment.
Other important international conventions, such as the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, or ICERD, and the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, also have significant relevance for achieving SDG 8, particularly when it comes to addressing and eliminating discrimination in the workplace.
Absolutely. ICERD explicitly prohibits racial discrimination in all aspects of employment, and CEDAW addresses various forms of discrimination against women in the world of work, like unequal pay and limited opportunities.
The International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families is another really important legal instrument to consider in the context of ensuring decent work for everyone.
This convention specifically aims to protect the rights of migrant workers, who are often particularly vulnerable to exploitation and unfair labor practices in destination countries.
Article 32 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, or CRC as we mentioned earlier, has a very specific focus on protecting children from economic exploitation and hazardous child labor.
Yes, Article 32 clearly recognizes the right of every child to be protected from economic exploitation and from performing work that is likely to be hazardous or interfere with their education, health, or overall development.
The UN Global Compact, which we touched on in our discussion about partnerships, also encourages businesses to align their strategies and operations with a set of 10 core principles that cover areas like human rights, labor standards, environmental protection, and anti-corruption. Many of these principles are directly relevant to promoting decent work.
The UN Global Compact provides a really important framework for encouraging businesses worldwide to uphold fundamental principles related to labor rights within their operations and supply chains, contributing to the broader goal.
Regionally, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights also contains several important articles that are relevant to the goals of decent work and broader economic development within its member states.
The African Charter explicitly prohibits exploitation and servitude, recognizes rights to free association and assembly, and enshrines the right to work under equitable conditions with equal pay for equal work. It also recognizes people's rights over their natural resources and to pursue economic development.
We are seeing an increasing number of national examples of legislation that focuses on business and human rights due diligence, which is closely linked to ensuring decent working conditions.
Yes, several countries, including France and Germany, have implemented specific laws requiring companies to establish robust due diligence procedures to identify, prevent, and mitigate adverse impacts on human rights and the environment in their operations and supply chains.
And the U.S.
Similarly, the U.S. Federal Acquisition Regulation includes provisions aimed at combating trafficking in persons in government contracting.
The European Court of Human Rights has also considered important cases related to labor exploitation and human trafficking, highlighting the legal obligations of states in this area.
The ECTHR case of RR and others v. the United Kingdom specifically concerned the prosecution of individuals who were themselves victims of trafficking. The court's judgment clarified the state's obligations to properly identify and protect potential victims and ensure they aren't unfairly penalized.
Finally, our sources provide some interesting national examples of initiatives aimed at promoting decent work and inclusive employment, such as Costa Rica's National Plan for Vocational Integration of People with Disabilities and the UK's landmark Modern Slavery Act.
These examples really showcase the diverse approaches countries are taking nationally to promote more inclusive employment for marginalized groups and to actively combat exploitation and modern slavery.
It's really clear that achieving the goal of decent work and economic growth for all requires a truly comprehensive and multifaceted approach, utilizing a wide array of legal instruments and proactive initiatives at all levels, from the global to the local. Now, let's turn our attention to our final Sustainable Development Goal for today, which is SDG 5, gender equality. This is absolutely fundamental for creating a just and sustainable world for everyone.
Absolutely. Securing full and equal gender equality rights for all individuals in every aspect of their lives is not just a matter of fundamental fairness, but is also absolutely essential for building a truly just and sustainable world.
And it cuts across all SDGs.
Yes, discrimination and disparities based on gender unfortunately cut across all of the SDGs. Mainstreaming a gender perspective into all development efforts is therefore absolutely crucial. Women and girls worldwide continue to disproportionately face discrimination in education and employment.
Hmm.
They are at a significantly higher risk of violence and exploitation and often have fewer legal rights regarding access to resources like health, food, and control over their own bodies and autonomy.
And other inequalities compound this.
Exactly. These gender-based inequalities are often compounded by other forms of inequality, such as those based on ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and poverty.
It's probably helpful to start by just defining what we mean by the terms gender and gender mainstreaming in this context.
Certainly. The term gender refers to the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a particular society considers appropriate for men and women. It's distinct from biological sex.
Okay. And gender mainstreaming.
Gender mainstreaming is a really important strategic approach. It's the process of systematically assessing the potential implications for women and men of any planned action, legislation, policies, programs in all areas and at all levels.
So looking at the impact on both.
Essentially, yes. It's about making sure the concerns and experiences of both women and men are fully integrated into the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies and programs so both benefit equally and existing inequalities aren't perpetuated.
Our sources really emphasize the strong and often overlooked interaction between SDG 5 and many of the other goals, using good health and well-being, or SDG 3 as a particularly clear example. Can you elaborate on that connection?
Absolutely. Women's specific health issues and needs are often underprioritized and underfunded in many healthcare systems. Implementing gender-sensitive budgeting and ensuring equal representation for women in health sector decision-making are crucial steps towards improving public health outcomes for everyone.
And empowering women helps children's health, too.
Yes. Empowering women and girls has been consistently shown to lead to improved health outcomes for children, as women often play the primary caregiver role.
It's also clear from our sources that discriminatory laws, unfortunately, remain a really major barrier to achieving meaningful gender equality in many parts of the world.
They do indeed. It's absolutely essential for lawyers and legal professionals involved in drafting or reforming legislation to proactively undertake thorough gender impact assessments.
To check for bias beforehand?
Exactly. This process helps identify and address any potentially discriminatory or adverse effects proposed laws might have on gender equality before they are enacted. A really wide range of stakeholders have a crucial role here. Law firms, governments, international agencies, civil society organizations. Law firms, for example, can contribute significantly by promoting gender equality within the legal profession itself.
Leading by example.
Ensuring equal pay and opportunities, increasing women's representation in leadership, and implementing family-friendly policies.
The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, is a really key international treaty when it comes to advancing gender equality globally.
CEDAW, adopted in 1979 with very high ratification, firmly establishes the principle of non-discrimination against women across all spheres: public, social, economic, private.
And it has an oversight body.
Yes, the CEDAW committee monitors implementation. It can hear complaints from individuals alleging violations and can initiate inquiries into grave or systematic violations in a country.
The protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, which we discussed earlier, is also highly relevant to the goal of achieving gender equality, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. This protocol specifically recognizes the multiple facets of human trafficking, which unfortunately disproportionately affects women and girls, very often for sexual exploitation, but also for other forms of exploitation and forced labor.
The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action from 1995 really affirmed the fundamental principle that women's rights are human rights, and highlighted a number of critical areas of concern for achieving gender equality globally.
The Beijing Platform for Action provides a really comprehensive and still very relevant roadmap for advancing women's rights and addressing persistent inequalities in areas from education and health to economic empowerment and political participation.
At the regional level, there are also important legal frameworks in place that aim to advance gender equality, such as the ASEAN Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women and the Inter-American Convention on the Prevention, Punishment, and Eradication of Violence Against Women, also known as the Convention of Belém do Pará in the Americas.
These really important regional instruments demonstrate strong commitments by countries within specific areas to actively address and eliminate violence against women and promote gender equality. The Convention of Belém do Pará, for example, has been ratified by almost all OAS member states, with a few exceptions.
The European Union also has a strong legal framework in place through its various treaties and directives that actively promotes gender equality across its member states.
Yes, gender equality is enshrined as a core value and objective within the fundamental EU treaties. The Charter of Fundamental Rights explicitly prohibits discrimination based on sex.
Leading to specific laws.
Yes, these principles have led to important EU directives mandating equal treatment for men and women in key areas like Social Security and employment. The Council of Europe has also issued important recommendations on preventing and combating sexism.
National legislation, of course, plays a crucial role in translating these international and regional commitments into concrete action on the ground to advance gender equality.
We see numerous examples. Germany has its General Act on Equal Treatment, implementing EU directives. South Africa's constitution strongly prohibits gender discrimination, and the country has a dedicated commission on gender equality.
Our sources also highlight several really significant court cases that have played a key role in interpreting and advancing gender equality laws in different parts of the world.
These legal cases really illustrate the practical application and interpretation of gender equality laws. The Bay case in South Africa addressed discriminatory inheritance laws.
Right.
Kell v. Canada saw the CEDAW committee rule on the state's obligations regarding domestic abuse against an Aboriginal woman. Defrend v. Sabina from the ECJ established the equal pay principle in the EU, and MCV Bulgaria at the ECTHR addressed the definition of rape and the need for effective investigation.
Landmark cases. It's also really important to understand the different ways in which gender discrimination can manifest itself in legal systems and in society more broadly.
Yes, we can see several distinct forms. Direct gender discrimination is when a law explicitly treats men and women differently based on sex.
Okay.
Indirect gender discrimination happens when seemingly neutral laws or policies actually have a disproportionately adverse effect on one gender. Discriminatory impact of law refers to situations where neutral-looking laws fail to account for existing gender inequalities, leading to discriminatory outcomes. And discriminatory absence of law is when the lack of a specific law allows gender discrimination to continue without remedy.
It seems like the current global context presents a bit of a mixed picture when it comes to the ongoing pursuit of gender equality, with both significant progress in some areas and concerning pushback in others.
That's a very accurate observation. While we've seen powerful global movements like Ni Una Menos and Me Too significantly raise awareness,
Huge movements.
there has also been a noticeable conservative pushback against gender equality efforts in certain regions and on specific issues. Furthermore, the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, had a disproportionately negative impact on women and girls globally, exacerbating existing inequalities.
Finally, our sources also really emphasize the crucial role that law firms and the legal profession as a whole can play is actively promoting gender equality within their own ranks and within the broader legal field.
Yes, there is a growing recognition within the legal profession of the vital importance of achieving gender equality. Many law firms and legal organizations are now implementing initiatives like women's forums, mentorship programs,
Trying to improve things internally.
and developing policies to address issues like equal pay, equitable promotion, and better work-life balance for both women and men. As a profession dedicated to justice and equality, ensuring gender equality within the legal field itself is absolutely paramount.
It's certainly clear that the journey towards achieving full and meaningful gender equality is an ongoing one, requiring continuous and dedicated efforts across legal frameworks, evolving societal norms, and individual actions in every part of the world. Well, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, taking a really deep dive into a wide range of interconnected sustainable development goals and exploring the absolutely crucial role that law plays in addressing these complex global challenges.
Indeed, we've really seen how legal frameworks, From global treaties and regional conventions down to specific national laws and landmark court cases are currently being utilized and, in many cases, still need to be significantly strengthened and more effectively implemented
Right.
to protect life below water and on land, to foster peace, justice, and strong institutions, to build essential partnerships, to combat poverty, promote good health, ensure decent work, and persistently strive for full gender equality.
It's really striking just how deeply interconnected all of these seemingly disparate challenges actually are. The health of our oceans, as we discussed, directly impacts livelihoods, which affects poverty, which can fuel instability. It's all linked.
It is.
Law, at its core, really provides the fundamental framework for navigating these incredibly complex relationships and for ultimately striving towards a more sustainable and truly equitable future for all people.
This really raises a crucial point for you, our listener. We encourage you to think deeply about how the specific legal instruments and the particular court cases that we've touched upon today, the ones that perhaps most resonated with you or piqued your curiosity, ultimately contribute to this much larger web of interconnected global challenges.
And maybe think about your own role.
And importantly, consider how individual actions, when they are informed by an understanding of these legal frameworks and by a strong sense of global responsibility, can indeed contribute to building a better and more sustainable future for everyone on our planet. We really encourage you to delve further into the specific legal instruments and the cases that stood out to you. There's a wealth of information there to explore.